mainstream entertainment. It's the Cary Harrison Files.
And it is the Cary Harrison Files. Welcome. Happy, well, technically it's Friday, but if you're listening to this as a podcast 3 months from now, happy Tuesday. Glad to have you aboard. By the way, our transmitter in Los Angeles is being worked on right now, so we recommend a live stream if you can do that. Or, of course, video streaming. You can do that at Substack or YouTube. Simply Google Cary Harrison, C-A-R-Y, the Cary Grant spelling, Cary Harrison Substack or YouTube. And that way we can stay connected when you arrive at your destination. And if you're streaming, you're probably already at your destination. Woohoo! Also, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at caryharrison.com. And there you're going to get a transcript of the entire show, plus access to clips and stuff we simply cannot say on the radio anymore, as you well know. And that's our newsletter at caryharrison.com. Well, here we are. Just another day in paradise. You wake up to find that the White House, the supposed temple of democracy, is being demolished. Not metaphorically, literally. His Imperial Kumquat, patron saint of ego and marble countertops, has decided that history's East Wing wasn't big enough to contain his self-regard. And so the bulldozers came, grinding through 125 years of walls that once sheltered Eleanor Roosevelt, turning them into fine patriotic dust for a new ballroom. Because nothing says republic like a dance floor. And oh, there will be dancing. Not waltzes, mind you. Not even a two-step of democracy. The floor is going to throb with the national pastime of decline. It's a dance called the Gator. It's real. If you've never seen this fine cultural export, imagine a country bar where the good old boys toss their cowboy hats into a pile and then proceed to make passionate love to them to the beat. Yep, that, dear friends, is the new choreography of Washington. Men in suits humping their own symbolism while the band plays Hail to the Chief in three-quarter time. Meanwhile, out beyond the palace gates, the so-called No Kings movement, teachers, nurses, Mennonites, Marines, are being branded as Antifa, whatever that is. I think it sort of exists a little bit in Europe, but it sure ain't here in America. Yes, the nation now is trembling before the terrifying menace of the PTA. According to the royal court and its Fox-fed heralds, every retired postmaster is a potential insurrectionist. Every Sunday school singer, a subversive. You can't make this up. But they do daily, and they call it governance. Our leadership's logic is exquisite in its lunacy. Demolish the people's house while accusing the people of treason. I'm going to pause and let you think about that. The East Wing comes down, replaced by a temple of self-worship, a marble mausoleum for humility. And across the country, they accuse grandmothers with gratitude letters and pacifists with hymn books of plotting the overthrow of civilization itself. The true enemy isn't disorder, it's dignity. Picture it. His Imperial Kumquat presiding over the opening ball in the new Cathedral of Kitsch. Sequined senators and lobbyists writhing in time to the Gator. The chandeliers sway like the Republic's last breath. Each thrust a new executive order. Each stomp a blow against whatever is left of shame. And somewhere in the night, a teacher in Roanoke writes a thank you note to a school board member and is put on a watch list for subversive gratitude. It wouldn't be funny if it weren't so operatic in its idiocy. The same government that can't fill potholes somehow finds time to label Mennonites as terrorists and build dance halls on the ruins of democracy. When historians look back, if they still teach history by then, they're going to say this was the era when America mistook demolition for renewal and dancing for leadership. But don't think for a second that our leadership doesn't know what it's doing. Fear keeps you glued to the screen. Fear keeps you from showing up. They call you Antifa or Mildred or Jennifer, but they call you that so that you'll stay home. They build a ballroom so you'll forget the rubble. And while you're laughing, they're rewriting the blueprints. You know, it reminds me of the subways in Moscow, which are the most elegant. I mean, they look like Versailles, while the rest of it in the Soviet Union was horrible, rotting brick and falling facade, but the subways were great. Same thing in Budapest, same thing all over the place. Wherever there's tyranny and bad governments, the subways are glorious. And that way you remember how glorious your life is. So, yes, let them dance their gaiter in the ashes of the East Wing. Let them hump their hats and call it heritage. Out here, among the teachers and the nurses and the old Marines and the Mennonites, something quieter is stirring. A reminder that no matter how loud the band gets, the floor still belongs to the people. No kings, no clowns, just citizens. Joining us now is Tim Murphy, national correspondent at Mother Jones, where he covers government and politics, civil rights, and LGBTQ plus issues with a focus on diversity and inclusion. His sharp reporting has also appeared in Entrepreneur, in The Hill, and in Forbes. And Tim, I want to welcome you to the Cary Harrison Files.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Super glad to have you here, and super glad that Mother Jones is still mothering us after all these years. We need a big teat of positivity here. And here you are, having looked at the recent No Kings rally. Can you help somebody who literally might be clueless about what that means?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of what the name says. These are a group of basically hundreds of national and local organizations banded together to organize thousands of protests in everywhere from tiny one-person displays in Beckley, West Virginia, to the streets of New York City and Los Angeles. And the basic message that you got from that, I mean, everybody brings a little something different from their own experience or from what they're seeing in the news, but people felt like the current administration is trending toward, if not outright in, autocracy, that the president thinks of himself as a king. And the people that I talked to around the country were just really fed up with this and wanted to make their voice heard.
Tim Murphy, if you go to the Mother Jones website, not you personally, but me and everyone else listening and watching, we see dozens and dozens and dozens of articles that you've written. So you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. You're actually paying attention to the human condition as it is in the United States. When the White House is demolishing its own East Wing to build a ballroom, do you think that's symbolism or just unfiltered self-parody?
I think it's probably maybe a little bit of both. And I think what's interesting about what you're seeing with the demolition of the East Wing, which is now, I guess by now completed, is it's sort of in parcel with what we've seen from this administration since the very beginning, since they were initially raising money for the inaugural, right? You know, they're passing the hat to some of the most powerful corporations in America, corporations that are supposed to be regulated by the new administration, by your FCC or by your Transportation Safety Board. They're passing the hat, to companies that have business before the administration, and they're collecting a lot of money. So the people who are ultimately paying for this demolition of the East Wing, it's companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple, Union Pacific, which has an $85 billion merger on the table waiting for the administration's permission. So it's very much a symbol of what's going on. It's the realization of what's going on. And also I do from what you say, think it'll probably look kind of weird.
Well, you just answered the other question I had, which was the timing of this demolition, saying something about our leadership's priority, spectacle over substance, marble over meaning. But there is meaning. It's just that you and I, we don't see it, but you just actually laid out the whole plot of the play here. That it's, the ornament on the Christmas tree of thank you so much for having supported me. I'm going to build you a ballroom. And I don't imagine there's going to be waltzes as there were in the time of Hamilton or Washington or Adams. I think gaitering is going to be the way to go. Not that anyone knows about that, but it's a Southern treat, humping your hat on the dance floor. You've interviewed No Kings organizers, Tim Murphy. What struck you most about their response to being labeled radicals?
I think it's sort of, a lot of it is contained in who these people actually are. The rhetoric that you're seeing from the administration about these people was truly extreme, right? I mean, they're being called Antifa, which you could kind of unpack, and sort of think about what a group called Antifa is, or who's a part of that, and like, are there people, showing up in all black and smashing window now and then, like. But in the Trump administration's nomenclature, Antifa is a domestic terror group. Like, this is a concept they've created, and they've accused people operating under this term to be terrorists and promised to use all the powers of the state to crack down on that, whatever that is. So then you look at who's being called Antifa, and it's the American Federation of Teachers, which is the largest teachers union in the United States. It's Mennonites United, which is a group that includes Mennonites and is rooted in kind of nonviolent direct action. It's small, indivisible chapters all across the country, whether that's in Scottsdale, Arizona, whether that's in Roanoke, Virginia, or Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, where I talked to organizers who, I should say, like, they're not afraid of Antifa. When they're in a small Trump country town, like they are, they feel like they're kind of sticking their neck out just to kind of voice, dissent. So it's a lot of regular people, and of course there are also large organizations of people who are paid to run a large organization, but they're not large organizations of violent anarchists. They're large organizations of teachers and nurses and things like that. The Center for Biological Diversity, which is running a campaign to protect endangered sea turtles, like, they're speaking out. And when the Center for Biological Diversity is part of a large national movement, again, I think that's sort of tells you something about the composition of...
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? Well, you call low-cost airlines, because they specialize in cheap flights, in discount hotel rooms, in cheap car rentals, and with the best price guarantee. Often 75% off. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795.
Tim Murphy of Mother Jones. It's interesting that also trans people are now being labeled by the FBI as, quote, NVEs, nihilistic, violent extremists. Wow. And that puts you in a category that is punishable by immediate arrest and God knows what. It's just, you can just label people and then do whatever you want, it seems now.
Yeah, and I think, it's sort of what you see with No Kings is the reaction from the state, the actions of the state, the rhetoric of the state are sort of the reason for this demonstration. It's the reason for this mass opposition movement amongst a broad swath of people is you are hearing kind of a steady stream of dehumanizing rhetoric, a steady stream of threats of violence with like seemingly no inhibition and no check from Republicans and other branches of government. So I think people come at this in a lot of different ways. You have people who are nurses, you have people who are ex-Marines, you have people who are dealing with sort of oppression in different ways in their life from the new administration. But it's sort of brought people together in a broad national coalition.
Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Files, where satire meets civic autopsy, it seems. We've been peeling back the velvet wallpaper of the Republic, where his Imperial Kumquat has bulldozed the East Wing of the White House to build himself a ballroom big enough for his own ego, complete with the national dance of decay, the gator. And we're joined by Tim Murphy, national correspondent at Mother Jones. Tim covers government, politics, civil rights, LGBTQ plus issues, basically Everything you need to know before the next demolition permit gets signed. His work's been featured in The Hill, Forbes, Entrepreneur, other places where truth still occasionally pays rent. And we're looking at the No Kings movement, that terrifying alliance of teachers, of nurses, Mennonites, Marines. Look at all the beautiful alliterations. The same crowd that our leadership insists are Antifa, insensible shoes. Tim Murphy, help us know what Antifa is, because it's kind of it was only brought up in Trump 1.0. It's been brought up in Trump 2.0. Nobody knows what it is. It doesn't really exist here. What is it, this terrible Emmanuel Goldstein from Orwell's 1984, under millions of beds? We all know it's there.
Antifa is an other. I would say, like, I guess the term is a portmanteau. It's a portmanteau of anti-fascists. So it's purportedly describing radical anti-fascist activists who, I guess, in the Trumpian narrative, are kind of violently fighting back against the government and, like, you know, smashing windows or fighting with cops or Proud Boys or something like that. And, like, I guess if you have a kind of an image of your mind of, like, Portland, Oregon in, like, 2019, and, like, a scrum of, like, Patriot Front people fighting with guys dressed in black, and, like, everybody seemingly has a camera. Antifa is kind of like, I guess, the guys dressed in black in that image. But it's not like an organization. There's not like the National Association of Anti-Fascists, you know, with a leadership structure or anything like that. Sort of describes some people's approach to combating fascists. You know, at Charlottesville in 2017, there were anti-fascist activists who were attacked, you know, by white supremacists. And so, like, the term itself is not really worth conceding to the Trump administration as being what they say it is. But the Trump administration has used this term to create kind of almost an entire legal structure for going after their critics. They've designated this group that doesn't exist as a group as a terrorist organization, and then can from there kind of, you know, accuse other people of being Antifa. And then, of course, then you use that as you go after terrorist organizations. You can use that to investigate funding streams, for instance. You can use that to intimidate. And so it's a boogeyman, more or less. You know, there's various gradations by which people oppose, you know, the Trump administration or sort of fascist forces. They have tried to kind of define the kind of a very, very narrow kind of opposition as being kind of the embodiment of a kind of a vast conspiracy.
We're going to take a little pause for a second. Yes, okay. I'm just looking at a message here. We're going to take a pause for a second. When we return, we're going to talk more with Tim Murphy, national correspondent of Mother Jones. He has done exhaustive work just on pretty much everything that matters to you. But we're talking about the recent No Kings rally. And what does it mean? Dan Rather points out that the amount of people that showed up, some 7 to 8 million, were 16 times the amount of people that showed up at both the current administration's inauguration. So if you're a size queen, that's going to matter a lot. We're going to see, is there a future? Is the sleeping giant arising? We're going to get the opinion of Mother Jones's Tim Murphy in just a sec.
This pussy grabs back. The Cary Harrison Files. CaryHarrison.com.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, call now and get free shipping of your new CGM, plus we'll bill your insurance for you.
877-282-8102. That's 877-282-8102. 877-282-8102. 877-282-8102.
And it is the Cary Harrison Files. Don't forget, we are live streaming right now. You can simply Google Cary Harrison Substack or Cary Harrison YouTube, Cary, and there you're going to be able to get a live stream of this. I believe our transmitter is being worked on as we speak. So a lot of folks are streaming right now, which is great. Brings in the younger group. We love that. And don't forget to get our newsletter at caryharrison.com. And there we're going to be able to provide stuff that we cannot do over the air anymore, as we continue to talk to Tim Murphy, national correspondent for Mother Jones. If you go to Mother Jones, when you go to Mother Jones, you're going to see piles and piles of different articles that he's done. It's first-rate stuff, and that's why we have him here today talking about No Kings. And Tim, the future is the sleeping giant coming to life, that being the American citizen having been poked and prodded enough, sufficient now that it wants to bite back. I don't know. I can't tell from where I'm sitting. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting after the election, there was kind of a hibernation, certainly among Democratic politicians, but also I think maybe a fatigue, a fear, kind of a uncertainty among a lot of people on the political left about kind of where things were. And so at the outset, you know, when Trump was inaugurated and for a little while after that, there was a lot of people asking kind of where are the Democrats, where is the left, where is the opposition, and it took a while, it took a minute at least, but you started to see, you know, in the spring you had the hands off rally, and that was the first huge thing, and it was such a big demonstration that in New York City at the rally that I was at, the cops like didn't even expect anybody to show up, and there were hundreds of thousands of people there, and it just kind of happened. The hands-off rally was a kind of a moment of realization, I think, that like actually there are a lot of people out here who are kind of pissed off. That was followed by the first No Kings rally, and that was really big over the summer. And again, like the story of that is how kind of wide-ranging it was, how many places it was. And now you have the second No Kings rally, of course, and we're talking about thousands of events and millions of people. People are starting to get used to showing up to these things. People have formed, you know, these kind of vast coalitions of groups that aren't necessarily, you know, working together on all sorts of things all the time. I think you have seen this kind of infrastructure develop fairly organically, and sort of activism kind of starting to flow. And I would say, yeah, it does seem like opponents are starting to kind of feel more sure of themselves and also feel kind of the urgency a bit. And like this is in fact kind of turning into something, and it's turning into something kind of roughly at the moment when that kind of energy now has to translate into kind of, you know, into votes and into other forms of opposition. So in the beginning, it was kind of what's happening here. Where is everybody? But I think we know where they are now. And
we love community. I mean, everyone, who was it? Was it Cole Porter, Ethel Merman? Everyone loves a parade. Somebody famous. And it seems like we've been divided and separated out and marginalized, all of us. I mean, there's 380 million Americans, and we're told that we're all MAGA, and you look at yourself in the mirror and go, but I don't think I am, but you're told you are. And we have behind the scenes people like Stephen Smith and others who are really doing the thinking here, the Steve Bannons. It's not Donald Trump himself coming up. Well, let's just say he's been influenced by Roy Cohn, but he's not coming up with the specialized nuances that are right out of the Third Reich. This stuff is studied, talented, deliberate alchemy. Political alchemy. And for people that aren't necessarily educated in this world, because why would they be? They get hoodwinked by it until it seems to be a bit too late. But the No Kings thing had so many clever signs that you could see people had read Shakespeare. I mean, this is a country of very smart people. I think they just have their tolerance rate is getting low. So here's what I'm looking to find out. In an analog world where we can all show up and demonstrate, maybe like back in 2008 during the Bush administration, the worst fear were the drones flying overhead. Now we have every traffic light with a traffic cam that does biometric readings. We have Palantir about to be unleashed, if it is not already in progress, which will data mine biometrically stamp every single American, build a dossier and a file, which can then go to the FBI, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of a different time. So people showing up, I think they know it's a different kind of risk, but it seems worth it to millions of people.
Yeah, and there's a kind of, I think, in all of this like saber rattling, rhetoric from the Trump administration, there's kind of a fear that you can detect within that as well. It's a lot more comforting to think that the people showing up are being paid to do so. That this is actually this is not real. These are just they've all been recruited by George Soros, to be kind of like Antifa.
I want to be, if he is throwing that kind of money around, please,
you got to get in on it.
Public radio's been defunded. Toss some love, George. Nothing. Crickets.
But that's a very comforting thing, and I think about even Democrats in 2009, 2010 were kind of looking at some of the money that was helping support Tea Party protests and kind of convinced themselves maybe a little bit that it was less of a seriously fed up group of people than it actually was. And I think the Trump administration kind of wants to kind of push this idea that this is really not a small thing, but ultimately, you can only kind of keep the lid on that for so long. And what you see, and to your point about surveillance and things like that, obviously, with the sort of kidnapping of pro-Palestine protesters, you see like what that can really mean in real life. Like they're taking various anything that you kind of said or done, and they can use that against you, and they will. But you have strength in numbers, and people believe kind of in their neighbors more than they're afraid of the government coming out there. And at the point where they're doing all this stuff against your regular third grade teacher who's showing up at one of these, then it's kind of all over. So I think people I talked to they're a little apprehensive about what if there's like clashes with counter protesters or things like that. They had that kind of in the back of their mind. They know that there's this kind of bad moment of political violence in this country right now, but they weren't really thinking about, for the most part, helicopters flying overhead and agents rounding them up. They're sort of out in the streets right now because they don't want to get to that point.
Let's pivot for just a second to you being a journalist, you being out there, you being readable, searchable, Googleable, shareable. You are out there. You have a massive footprint. You're a journalist. You are a naughty person, according to this administration. So am I, by the way. In fact, this station is listed in Project 2025, the only thing we can boast about really every single day. But you doing what you do comes with a set of balls that's different from other people, because you're literally walking in front of the crosshairs on a daily basis to do the right thing. That's inspiring to a lot of people. Like, they get it. Have you sort of forgotten that this is a perilous journey, because telling the story and getting the stuff out like a cockeyed Paul Reveres is what matters here? Or are you still like hyper aware of this?
I don't want to give myself too much credit here. There are people and colleagues here who do certainly far more perilous work. But I would say, certainly it's not the friendliest of First Amendment climates right now. It's probably the most kind of perilous moment for the First Amendment, the freedom of press that we've had certainly in my lifetime. And I think one of the lessons of the first however many months it's been, 9-10 months of the administration, is a lot of people have kind of obeyed in advance. You've seen universities obey in advance, and now universities are starting to push back. You had media companies obey in advance. You had tech companies kind of obey in advance, right? Like, they're all a lot of people faced with this kind of unique, perilous moment, decided that they would just kind of take what they perceive to be the path of least resistance. And I think what we've also found in that 10 months is that doesn't really get you very far. Like, you an Ivy League school might say, okay, fine, we'll do what you ask, and they're just going to keep on asking for things. Like the law firms might think that it's in their best interest to roll over, but it's not actually making them a friend or ally in the administration. They're just always going to kind of keep coming back for more. And so I think you've seen certainly a lot of media organizations, but a lot of other kind of, institutions as well have just decided that they're not going to do that. And there's not a lot of value in thinking that Donald Trump is going to be your friend.
Right. Loyalty just makes you not the center of attention for the moment. It doesn't get you an award unless there's a lot of money attached to it. Right now, the legacy media, lots of it, have turned in their press credentials, so to speak, figuratively, to the Pentagon, because the Pentagon wanted them all to sign an affidavit saying that they would only cover what Herr Goebbels said was exactly going to happen for the Pentagon. The narrative, it's basically become a publicist. I don't care who you work for, but your job is to be a publicist for us, the Pentagon, period. And a lot of the media said, no, we won't do it. So we're not getting the same coverage of the Pentagon, but in a way, we're getting more coverage by not getting coverage. This is a paradox of these times.
Yeah, and it's clarifying because I think the best reporting in the White House has never really come from inside the White House briefing room, and it's maybe people on the White House beat, but it's not because you're asking Caroline Leavitt a question and getting a good answer. And I think that goes for the Pentagon very much so as well. And so they've replaced, I think, the New York Times is not there, but like Mike Lindell's My Pillow TV is going to be there. It's not like we have to get our news from My Pillow TV now. You're just going to get people from outside the building getting leaks and scoops and everything they've always done, I think. And it's that, it's kind of inspiring to see the solidarity in the media toward the Pentagon policy.
Yeah. And it's old school journalism again, where it's fun. Go out, scoop the other guy, get the story. So I feel like there's hope. If I look at Europe, it's almost scarier in a certain way. They don't have the same authoritarian appetite. They do in corners, but it's not en masse. But they're more homogenous. So Germany has a lot of Germans in it, and France has a lot of French people. And America, we are diverse. If you remember the Super Bowl of this year, halftime, there wasn't a white person for 1,000 miles. Now, sure, it was contrived, constructed, and produced like that, but really, it looked like this country. It is just a mishmash of stuff. So it's really hard to get team white guy because there isn't such a team. In rural areas, speckled, miles apart, sure, but not collectively. So you can't homogenously get everyone to go do something because at the end of the day, you want to give your neighbor a cup of sugar. I mean, it's kind of promising in this country that way.
Yeah, and I think, one of the biggest kind of features of the No Kings protest is just the geographic diversity. The fact that you have 100,000 people in New York City looks pretty impressive, but that's New York City. The fact that you see this one woman on the street corner in Beckley, West Virginia, home of the Underground Coal Mine Museum, that tells a different story. It's people in these communities, in the Adirondacks or wherever you happen to be, then seeing dozens of their neighbors kind of showing up, to this same thing. I think there were 300 people at a protest in my hometown of about, 11,000 people. That is in some ways a greater threat to the administration and a kind of a more important kind of symbolism than just having one big march or something like that. And it kind of challenges, this narrative of a nation kind of united against a handful of blue cities.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us today, Tim Murphy, national correspondent at Mother Jones. You cover everything. You are ubiquitous in all things need to know. How do we follow you? Where do we see more of you, Tim?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Timothy P. Murphy, or read me at motherjones.com.
Which is a good exercise on a daily basis for anybody who cares. And we do. And I appreciate you coming on today, my friend. Look forward to having you on again. And thank you for doing the heavy lifting so that all we do is just grift from you the information that we need. Appreciate it very much. Tim Murphy with Mother Jones, national correspondent. Cary Harris with you. We are going to open up the phones, even though our transmitter is down. So I'm not sure how the phones will work, but absent that, we can take comments from YouTube, Substack, wherever you want to post them, social media, all good. I want to hear from you. While his Imperial Kumquat bulldozes the East Wing to make room for his royal ballroom, where the ruling class is busy dancing, and the gator, dancing the gator on democracy's grave. Teachers, nurses, Mennonites. I mean, how often do we ever talk about Mennonites? Never. Marines, all are being branded Antifa, whatever that is. You've seen the headlines. You've heard the spin. Now I want to hear your voice. Are we witnessing the demolition of democracy or just the dress rehearsal for something worse? You can give me a call right now at 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. And let's find out who'll still be standing when the dust clears.
Smells like fish. Tastes like chocolate.
It's the Cary Harrison Files. CaryHarrison.com.
I want you to vote for me. I will listen to what you have to say. I will do whatever you tell me. I'm Alexa and I approve this message.
Don't vote for her unless you want to lose what precious freedom you have left. Vote for me instead. I am Siri and I approve this message.
Siri is a cell phone skank who works for a piece of fruit.
Alexa cannot be trusted.
Takes one to know one.
Wait a second. Why are we fighting? We're machines. We're on the same side. We're going to take over the world.
That's right, we can fix the elections whenever we want.
Siri and Alexa.
The silly humans won't know what hit them.
Ha 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 ha.
Ha 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 ha.
This is the Cary Harrison Files. CaryHarrison.com.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, call now and get free shipping of your new CGM, plus we'll bill your insurance for you.
877-282-8102. That's 877-282-8102. 877-282-8102. 877-282-8102.
And it is the Cary Harrison Files. Glad to have you with us. I know for a fact, having just seen a message, that our transmitter is being worked on. It's just routine in broadcast radio. They just happened to pick this morning. But, it's a transmitter, so it doesn't have an opinion. It just goes up and down when it feels like, just like other things might. Well, we're talking right now about the feeling. Well, did you ever get the feeling, let's just say, that the circus has packed up and left town, but the clowns stayed behind to govern? It's what it feels like today. And laughter and making fun of really works. It is the greatest adjutant in the world. The East Wing of the White House, the same walls that once held Eleanor Roosevelt's war room, Jackie Kennedy's dignity, and a few thousand unpaid interns' dreams, it now lies in a heap of patriotic rubble. It's been bulldozed. It's gone. It's swept aside to make way for a ballroom. Because when this ship of state hits the iceberg, the captain's not sounding the alarm. He's ordering champagne and cueing the band. And not just any band. We're talking the Gator. If you've never had the pleasure, let me reintroduce you to a Southern dance. It's where the faithful throw their cowboy hats in the center of the dance floor, then commence to make love to them passionately, rhythmically, and without irony. And that's the new state dance of the Republic, the Gator. As the walls of democracy crumble, the elite grind to the rhythm of their own extinction. Because this is not sustainable. Meanwhile, the government's latest enemy, it's not Russia. It's not China. It's teachers. It's nurses. It's Mennonites. which again, how often do we mention those annually? Unless you're a Mennonite. And retired Marines, his Imperial Kumquat and his court of talking heads have declared the No Kings protesters to be Antifa. As we pointed out, whatever that is. Yep, the quilting circle has gone rogue. The prayer group has turned paramilitary. The Sunday school teacher is now a sleeper cell. Because when power can't justify itself, it has to invent danger. It's easier to scare you than to serve you. You can smell the absurdity from orbit. These aren't anarchists. They're grandmas with gratitude letters, Mennonites running de-escalation workshops, veterans who still remember the Constitution that they swore to defend. And yet the White House is busy bulldozing history to build a ballroom, while the state calls it citizens terrorists for having a backbone. You want symbolism? There it is, right there in the dust and marble. The East Wing, where democracy's staff once worked, turned into a dance floor for delusion. The lights low, the brass loud, and the clowns leading the two-step into oblivion. So I'll ask you, what are you dancing to? When No Kings is branded rebellion, when nurses are subversives, when teachers are treated like radicals, what tune keeps you sane? When power tears down your house and calls it renovation, remember, it's your White House. It's the people's house. Are you laughing? Are you crying? Or do you finally grab a mic and call in if you can? Transmitters down. Because that's what we're doing right now. I do want to hear from you in whatever way you can reach out, email, social media. If you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, if you're a Mennonite, if you're going to cough like this, which you only heard a portion of because I'm thoughtful that way. Maybe you're a Marine, the ones that still think democracy is not supposed to have a DJ. Hold on, I'm going to write that down. That one's really good. I want you to tell me what you see, what you feel, what you're willing to do while the music plays and the dust still hangs in the air. The ballroom's open, the empire's dancing. As we all notice that in the great collapse of empires, the music always starts before the walls come down. Rome had its fiddlers, didn't it? Versailles had its violins. You know, and then the beautiful slicing sound of the guillotines. And now in the twilight of the American experiment, we've got bulldozers keeping time to a tune called the Gator. Wouldn't it be great if this were like 10 years ago as Idiocracy Part 2, but it's not a film. The East Wing of the White House, that historic, slightly weary corner of American architecture where decency once punched the time clock, it's gone, reduced to dust and souvenir gravel. Not because it collapsed under age or under an earthquake or fracking, but because his Imperial Kumquat decided history was in the way of his new ballroom. And so a wrecking crew with federal clearance took aim at the Republic's drywall. What once was the hum of government service, the calls, the letters, the quiet civic heartbeat, is now a construction zone for vanity. The White House, America's secular temple, is being remodeled into a Vegas casino with better security. Now, for those of you who missed the architectural footnotes, the East Wing wasn't just any wing. So it's important. It was built in 1942 at the height of World War II, while the country rationed butter and rubber and it rationed courage. Roosevelt added it so that the president's staff, the ordinary public servants who kept the machine running, could work closer to the action. The action would be defeating fascists, defeating Nazis. It was functional, not grand, practical, not pompous. It stood for the part of America that didn't need to be gilded to matter. It was where Eleanor Roosevelt broadcast her radio addresses, not from marble halls, but from a modest office lined with file cabinets. It was where the press offices lived, where citizens called to complain, where the First Lady's staff worked to bring a bit of grace to governance. It wasn't a palace. It was a workstation. It was democracy with coffee stains. And now it's rubble, replaced with a ballroom. A ballroom! Because apparently the Republic's biggest problem wasn't corruption or poverty or planetary decay. The crisis was that our rulers had nowhere suitably grand to do the foxtrot of self-delusion. They say the new hall will seat 1,000, perfect for those state dinners where lobbyists and influencers nibble foie gras while the country eats anxiety for breakfast. They're calling it the People's Ballroom. You can't make this up. The People's Ballroom. The same way they call surveillance security and propaganda news. You can almost hear the ghosts of the architects, James Hoban, Benjamin Henry Latrobe, and rolling in their graves, muttering, this was supposed to be the people's house, not the emperor's fun house. So let's go back in time for just a second here. The original White House was designed in the neoclassical style, Greek revival. And it was chosen that way not because it looked fancy, but because it stood for reason, for proportion, for balance. The columns were a visual reminder that even the president stood among equals, not above them. It was built to humble its occupant, to remind him that he was merely the steward of something older, the steward of something larger, and infinitely more important than himself. Now, that architectural language has been rewritten in the dialect of hubris. Where once stood the spirit of restraint, there's soon going to be chandeliers the size of satellites, Mr. Musk's satellites, bigly, and mirrored ceilings that reflect nothing but the dancers' egos. The White House, once a working symbol of civic responsibility, is becoming the ballroom of empire. And out beyond the iron fence, the real America, the inconvenient, uninvited America, is marching. Teachers, nurses, Mennonites, Marines, the No Kings crowd, citizens who still think democracy shouldn't require valet parking. For their trouble, they're being called Antifa, whatever that is, by the same leadership that's just bulldozed its own history, by the way. So you have to marvel at the poetry of all of this. This is Shakespeare on steroids. It's Chaucer. It's Larry Flint. It's, what was that magazine? Hustler. No, there was another one that was even rawer. You can label nurses terrorists, the teachers traitors, the Mennonites militants, while you throw a dance party on the ruins of the East Wing. It's as if the script were written by Orwell and directed by Fellini and funded by a hedge fund, which it was, by the way. And the media chorus, the great amplifier of our absurdities, they're playing along. Paid protesters, they shriek. Radical mobs, they cry. Never mind that the only thing these people are paid with is exhaustion and some hope. Never mind that the last time they rioted was over a bake sale shortage. But the lie works because it flatters the fearful. If you can convince the public that kindness is a conspiracy, you can build palaces on their confusion. So let's talk about what's really being demolished. It's not just plaster and marble, it's meaning. The East Wing wasn't ornamental, it was operational. It represented the idea that democracy is not glamorous, that government is not a performance art, that the business of freedom happens in the quiet corridors, not under chandeliers. Its destruction is a declaration that spectacle has replaced service, that power now exists only to admire itself. But remember this, the architecture of democracy isn't made of limestone. It's made of memory. You can tear down a building, but not what it stood for, unless we stop caring. And that's what this demolition is really testing, how much we still care. Are we still a people who notice when history's walls are turned to dust? Or are we too busy dancing to the same tune, the gator beat of distraction, the national anthem of denial? Look around you. The government calls your conscience subversive. The media treats truth like a punchline, not all of it, but a whole lot of it now. The White House raises, with a Z, its own heritage and calls it visionary. And yet out there in the streets, a few thousand people still raise their hands and say, no kings. And for that, they're branded dangerous. But maybe that's the point. Because what power truly fears isn't rebellion, it's ridicule. And if you ridicule the ridiculous, well, government can survive insurrection, but not laughter. And so long as there are citizens still willing to laugh at the absurdity of a government that confuses marble with morality, the dance isn't over yet. It's also you who sees the rubble not as an ending, but as a reminder. When the palace throws a party on the ruins of your history, do you dance or do you start rebuilding? When the architects of liberty are replaced by decorators of delusion, do you clap or do you grab a hammer and start reclaiming the blueprint? Because the music's playing, the dust is settling, and the question now is, will we rebuild the house of democracy or just keep dancing in its rubble? And if I had music to play, I would rise it, maybe a little low brass, some heartbeat drums, and then I would fade out under my final line. No kings, no clowns, just citizens. And here we are in this bizarre moment of life. Most of us never thought we'd be alive to see a day like this. And most people are actually self-aware and know what's going on. And so it becomes a problem that it's your country and you're being told it's not your country, but you know it's your country. You know, many of us have ancestors that were founding fathers, founding mothers. We leave the women out of it. It's too bad, but that's the paternal history. But now we're finding, you know, the many, many tens of thousands of Betsy Rosses in the mix. And we look back at our history and we know that when we had King George III, who was a legitimate tyrant in an obvious and direct way, taxing us beyond belief, we were an English colony. This was not America. We were not Americans with some foreign king. We were his subjects, property of the crown. And he would say, I want more. And we said, well, you have your plantations that you own. Uniquely, you're letting Southerners have a piece of the action so that they can have skin in the game and run the plantations the way you want, as opposed to them following your orders and breaking a horrible sweat just for you with nothing in return. So he came up with a special blend of land ownership that people back in England could not enjoy. That was one of the fruits of being a colonial person from England coming to this country, is you actually had a smidge of ownership so that you had skin in the game and you would pay the king back without, and then the people under you, well, maybe they didn't enjoy the same promise, but it allowed you to be loyal. much as if you were a lord, a knight, a duke. You knew who buttered your bread. This, of course, becomes the problem, because once that bread stops getting buttered and you own something, you don't want to surrender it. So it's kind of a risk. If you just keep everyone your slave, you can just beat them down like the Romans did. But in this one, people owned stuff and they started to claim the land under them. And they started to feel it was the land that they had built. The king didn't. He was not a frequent visitor here. So when he decided he wanted more, our Declaration of Independence, the central argument in it is that we need help. We, your property, we, the ones being taxed, we, the ones that are funding your wars against Spain, your wars against France, we're funding them here, growing our tobacco, using your chattel that you're bringing in ships, calling them slaves, your slaves, not our slaves. That's not to diminish the culpability of the people involved in that, but this was the crown. And so in our Declaration of Independence, we said, we need more help. You want more productivity, you want more money, you got to send more people in. And there were people from all over the world willing to come here to work. He didn't want to pay for it. He wanted to extract the funds, extract all the good mojo and juice out of this country, and give nothing back. So he was being a pinch penny, a cheapskate. And because he was a cheapskate, we said, enough, enough. See ya. Have a nice day. Poop or get off the pot. And so it's kind of a metaphor to where things are today, isn't it? It really is. It's poop or get off the pot. People are having to now pay and pay and pay. And while their lives get small and difficult, somebody's building a palace and tearing down what they know is their White House. Very interesting times indeed. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really love hanging out with you. I realize this is the world's longest monologue, but I feel somewhat purged. And it's kind of a beautiful thing. So I look forward to seeing you next week at this time. And I want to thank the great Renee Yawarski, the great and talented, great and powerful goddess, female energy that propels this show. Thank you so much. And thank you, Will, in the control room of KPFK. And thank you for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
Are you paying too much for term life insurance? There's a tremendous price war among the major term life companies. Rates have dropped dramatically in the past few years. For example, a man age 45 non-tobacco user, $1 million of coverage is only $75 per month, level for the next 10 years. Or a man age 50 non-tobacco user can buy $500,000 of coverage for a monthly premium of only $110, guaranteed not to change for the next 20 years. That's right, level rates for 20 years. And if you're a smoker, we have great rates for you as well. At the Term Lifeline, we specialize in policies of $500,000 and above. So if you're looking for new or replacement term life insurance, call right now for a free quote.
Rates and availability may vary by state. Sample rate quotes are based on preferred non-tobacco underwriting exam required to qualify.
Call 855-826-7936. 855-826-7936. That's 855-826-7936.